Good morning everyone and a warm welcome to today's Broadland District Council Planning Committee meeting, both for those present and those watching online. My name is Councillor Eleanor Laming and I will be chairing the meeting today. On the top table we have Planning Officer Sarah Everard, Area Team Manager. We have Ben Burgess, Assistant Director of Planning, and we have Lucy Palmer from Democratic Services. Planning officers will come up to introduce applications as they arise on the agenda. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but if the alarm does sound, please leave via the fire exits, which are clearly signed in green, and assemble in the car park outside. This meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available later to view online. Members of the public are welcome to film the proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record this meeting, please could you identify yourselves now. Please can you ensure that all your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone while the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks if needed throughout the meeting. And if you must use your mobile phone, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is set out in the agenda, which is published on our website. There have been some changes to this, which I will go through later. All members will have received in advance a copy of the agenda, the presentations and any updates. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker and there's a maximum of 15 minutes allowed per category. So if there are a number of speakers, you will need to arrange how to allot the time between you. Only those people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee, which will be to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. When it is your time to speak, you will be invited to come and sit in the public speaking area, which is just over there. The order of public speaking is parish or town council first, followed by objectors, then supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of 5 minutes per speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee, and again these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. And then the committee will discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents, photographs or anything of that nature at this meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? Okay, thank you. So we now come to items of the agenda. Number 1 is declarations of interest. I should say that I believe that all councillors have been lobbied by district councillors for Helsden South East for the applications relating to the Norwich Golf Club site on Drayton High Road. Is that correct? And I also believe that all councillors have been lobbied by a resident via email in relation to application 4D on the agenda, which is in Helsden, land north of Carrowbrick House. Is that correct? Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. Item 2 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Creamy-Guvanlu and Councillor Johnson, with Councillor Brennan as his substitute.
Thank you. Item 3 is minutes, to confirm the minutes from the meeting of the Planning Committee, which was held on the 16th of July 2025. Do we have any comments on those minutes? I just have one that the time says 9 o'clock, but we actually started the meeting at 9:30. Thank you. And now we come to applications to be considered at this meeting. That's item 4 on this agenda. I do need to inform you now that there have been some changes to the published agenda. So the first is that application number 2022039, which is item number 4B on the agenda and covers the matters for phase 3 of the development of the Norwich Golf Club site at Drayton High Road, will not be considered today. This is because Planning Committee members and officers received an update to the plans from the developer very late, and this needs to be considered before this application comes to committee. So it will come forward at a future committee. I also need to inform you that application number 2025/2234, which is item number 4E on the agenda, will not be considered today, as there are further matters to consider before it comes to committee. So we now move on to the remaining items on the agenda. We had 2 applications at the top of our published agenda, which were item 4A and item 4B. Both apply to the Norwich Golf Club site on Drayton Road in Helsdon, and therefore they are linked. As I've already mentioned, item 4B will not be considered today. That leaves the first item on this agenda for the same site, which is for a variation of condition 1 of planning application 20181963 to amend the current master plan to reflect changes to the remaining phases with viability appraisal and deed of variation to the Section 106 agreement. Before we progress with the presentation of this application, I have a proposal for the committee, and that is items 4A and 4B are both complex applications relating to this site. They include multiple matters regarding serious consideration before a decision can be made according to planning policy. In my view, we need to consider the context of the whole site in much more detail and then look at both applications together so that everything has been done to ensure that we come to a fair and reasonable decision. I therefore propose that Planning Committee members should undertake a site visit on a future date before considering these applications at committee. Do I have a seconder from the committee? Thank you very much. So we have a seconder, Councillor Stuart Clancy. Could I ask for those people who are in favour of that proposal to raise their hands, please? Thank you very much. So that proposal has now been passed. So we will come to reconsider both applications which regard to the Norwich Golf Club site at a future committee after doing a site visit to look at all the issues, as it were, on the ground, which I think we need to do. Thank you. We now move to item 4C on our agenda, which is item number 2023/3726. It relates to a gas site on Harbord Road in Frettenham, and it is a hybrid application comprising full permission for one dwelling and site access, outline permission for 4 self-build plots, and conversion of the existing building to one dwelling, comprising a total of 6 dwellings. I'll just give a minute for everyone to leave. And so we have to present this application, Planning Officer Peter Kerrison, who is a Principal Planning Officer for Broadland. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, moving on to this item, it is a hybrid application. So you will notice in the committee report there is quite a list of conditions at the back of it. That's because a hybrid planning application is technically not an application type, so we're simultaneously considering a full application and an outline application. So that condition list at the back reflects kind of a two permissions effectively that would be granted on this one. So that's for context as I run through the presentation here. So the application site is on the former gas site south of Harbord Road in Frettenham. It is a brownfield site, previously developed land. Whilst a great deal of the previous sort of paraphernalia associated with the site use has been removed, there is a reasonable amount of concrete hard standing. There's an existing building and a few other items sort of left on the site for it to still be considered as a brownfield site in terms of planning policy assessment. It is located outside of the defined development boundary for Frettenham, albeit adjacent to it. And in terms of looking at planning policy hooks for the proposed development, it touches on a number of them, but doesn't quite sit within any particular planning policy. So, for example, it includes self-build, which is covered by policy 7.5 of the Greater Norwich Local Plan, but that only allows up to 3, and we've got 4 in this proposal. There's a building conversion included in here, which is another Broadland Local Plan policy, but again, it's only part of the development. So there are relevant parts, but as a whole, it's got to be considered as contrary to policy because of its location outside the development limits and no exact fit in any of those policies. So the way it's been assessed is considering the council's lack of land supply under paragraph 11D of the NPPF and the tilted balance. So looking at the site in more detail in terms of the aerial imagery, so the site access comes off the end of Harbord Road where the turning head is. There's an existing gate in here. The existing building is just next to the entrance here that's proposed for conversion, and then the site takes in the top end. So I've marked very roughly with a red line approximately how far down the former gas site this development comes. As you can see, it's only really the top end. It is noted in the planning history that applications have been refused on here for a much greater number of dwellings in the past, which used the full site rather than just this top bit. And just flicking back on a historic Google Earth image, just to show the context of what the site used to be. And this is relevant to some of the highway comments on the application, because you can see I guess the HGV entrance used to be off of the west side here and up to Pound Hill, whereas the entrance for the site office used to be up at the top end. The highway's response is very much along the lines that the access up at this end onto Pound Hill is not safe and inadequate for residential development. There's a very large TPO'd tree that sits right in the middle of the visibility splay on that road. So any development on this site going forward must come from this top end, which is reflected in the design of the proposal that we've got in front of us. And that also significantly limits how much of the site can be developed. Some other key features around the site, I'll flick back up to the present day. This group of trees on the west side here have all got tree preservation orders, and there's a county wildlife site that borders the site all the way down the east side and kind of stretches east from the site on that side. So it's got some relatively sensitive boundaries that need to be taken into account. And then, so you've got the neighbouring dwellings on its northern edge, on the end of Harbord Road. And again, I've just popped a line on there to show very roughly where the proposed development kind of comes down to. So the existing site layout, as you can see in the existing dwellings up on the north side here, the building for conversion, you've got the TPO trees, kind of areas of hard standing that are still sat in the centre of the site. And then moving on to the proposed site plan. So there's 6 plots in total. So coming in from the north side, this is an indicative layout to show that a design reflective of the existing street scene can be achieved up at the top, but ultimately that's an outline plot that would need reserved matters to confirm that design. Plot 2 over here is the conversion of the existing building. Again, details to be sort of by reserved matters. Plot 3 is the one dwelling that's been provided in full, with full design details, including a detached garage. So that comes off the private drive, and then that private drive bends round to serve plots 4 through 6 to finish off the remainder of that row. The plots are quite large, so dwelling sizes are likely to be larger than those existing on Harbord Road, although the plot sizes are not significantly larger than plots sort of further north, as there are some reasonably sized gardens as you go up that road. So in terms of overall settlement pattern, it's broadly acceptable. There is also a level difference between the end of Harbord Road here going down into the site, so the land level does drop as you go to south down here, which when you see the design of plot 3 here is a 1.5 storey dwelling, whereas most of the dwellings on Harbord Road are single storey or with loft conversions. That is possible because of that slight drop in land levels, which should mean that the overall heights are not significantly higher than those already present on that road. And again, the rest of those designs would be by reserved matters. So the design of that plot 1, as you can see, it's sort of a 1.5 storey, just under 2 storey design with this slightly lower eaves height. Very much maintaining its primary window openings to the front here and to the rear, with larger openings looking south over what will be sort of open land. Gone with a mix of traditional materials and some modern features such as the green roof on the flat roof porch there. I think mix of materials is again broadly acceptable on this plot. The existing street scene has quite a mix of different, whilst most of them are single storey, there is a mix of different material types along there, including red brick, weatherboarding, some render. So there's no particular defining style that would need to be sort of matched in these plots. Again, looking in floor plans, they are quite, or this one in particular is quite a substantial dwelling, but in its location, there isn't an amenity impact or particular design or landscape impact from it. And just to confirm the design of the garage that will sit in front of it, you'll sort of see the garage as you come into the site before you see the dwelling. The other part of the proposal that's being secured by condition is a request from the local highway authority, and there has been quite a lot of concern raised, particularly by local residents, around traffic and highway safety, particularly on Harbord Road. And whilst 6 dwellings is not going to be a significant traffic generator, the local highway authority does consider it to necessitate an amended junction design. So this is Harwood Road here, and then the junction with Post Office Road and Pound Hill. I've got some photos of it to show the existing situation, which is sort of a 3-way with an island there. So the local highway authority are proposing to simplify that somewhat into a single access point. You've got the further junction down the hill, which adds complication to it on the existing situation. So it's a chance to sort of improve the highway network and mitigate for the proposed development at the same time. That can be achieved within highway land. So part of the list of conditions is the necessary highway conditions that would be necessary to secure this work and provide it at an appropriate time. And then just a kind of Google Maps image to show the current interaction of road layouts in the top end there. So moving on to photos of the site, this is looking south down Harwood Road. So the gate there is the site access point. This building is the one proposed for conversion, and it is a relatively prominent feature in the street scene right down at the end of the road there, albeit it's constructed in traditional materials and has a reasonably dwelling-like appearance already, so is quite a logical choice for conversion on that particular one. And it's difficult to show to sort of level changes by photograph, but the site levels drop down from this entrance point as you look forward to the south there. So the private drive would go down there and then branch off. So the dwelling that we've got in full that you can see in the plans would be sort of in front of you here as you went in. You wouldn't be able to see plot 1 from this angle because it would be round the side next to the existing one, and then the other plots would stretch behind in that location. Again, just moving forward, beginning to show the interaction with one of the closest neighbours on the corner here, with a detached garage at the front. I think, which is why the plot next to it, in terms of its indicative design, is demonstrated that it can mirror that. It's got sufficient space too on the other side. Again, this is the current boundary with the site, or it's possibly slightly more overgrown now because these photos were a couple of years ago when the application first came in. But so this would be a sort of direct residential boundary between this dwelling and that first plot, which would sit directly next to it here. And that's probably the closest interaction between existing dwellings and the proposed development. This is the front of that existing building proposed for conversion. And I did pop out last week just to confirm that the site hadn't changed since the first application came in, and apart from some kind of significant growth of the plants, it looks the same. So that's last week. And then just looking through the site, you can see the kind of existing areas of concrete and some fencing and other elements of the sort of that gives hints to that previous use. And I think one of the benefits of the scheme is really clearing this sort of past feature up. And again, swinging round, so somewhat covered by ivy and other vegetation, but the TPO trees are all in this this group here, and they are being now retained. You'll have seen potentially a amendment to the site layout to retain that. And then moving into the site, looking back up towards that existing building, and then this is the other neighbouring property on the east side, just behind it here. So that's the other property that's close in terms of the boundary. This is looking up the former HGV access to the site, so the one that's not being used for this development, looking across. So plot 2 will be right next to you. Plot 3 will be right next to you here, the one that's proposed in full, and then the other outline plots stretch away across to the east here, and then plot 1 sort of around the side of the trees. one thing I didn't pick up on the previous site plan, but I'll cover at the end. There is an element of commercial land that's excluded from the development, which will not change use as part of this proposal. I'll highlight it on the site plan when I get to the end of the presentation. But that's located in here, so there'll be a small section that's not included in the development that will retain its historic use. Although looking at site histories and planning histories of that area, the uses that have been approved on there broadly relate to storage type uses. And as you can see, there's no buildings on there. So it's not considered that could be used for anything that would negatively impact residential amenity to any degree of significance without a further planning permission. So whilst it still could be used for commercial purposes, storage purposes, that should be compatible with residential development that's next to it. And again, just another view of the inside of the site. And this is the county wildlife site directly in front of you here. So again, on the list of conditions, there are some conditions around plot 6 and how the boundary and landscaping is done to interact with that. A few other views in the site. And then just one more, so this is where the private drive will come round and looking back up towards the site access and the existing dwelling. And then just finally a few images of the current highway layout up at the junction that's proposed for change. So you can see this is Harvard Road here, and then the junction has this sort of triangular feature in the middle, which is proposed to be removed with a single point of access onto the road there as part of the highway works. Just swinging round, and then that's the interaction with the other junction further down the road. And then looking back at Harvard Road itself in terms of accessing into the site. So just to pick up a few things back on the site plan at the end, this area of land in here is that commercial parcel that's being retained, that's outside of the ownership of the current applicant. You might have seen in some of the highway communication regarding this historic access, it's again excluded from the site plan, but there is a civil right of access for this parcel to use this piece of land, which can't be amended through this planning permission. It's a civil matter outside of the control of the planning system. But the conditions imposed on the development just ensure that the residential development here can't use that. So that's a combination of a condition that requires all access to be taken from the top, and then just to reinforce that, I've proposed a condition for the boundary treatment along the side of plot 3 here to be agreed and retained in perpetuity, so that no new access from plot 3 can be put out onto that side.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you, Peter. So you're saying that the access is on the old access route, but where is the entrance to the commercial land? Because that isn't very clear from the slide. Thank you, Chair.
It is not marked specifically on here because there's no boundary there at the moment, so this is currently open. So part of the landscaping condition will agree the details of the landscaping here, which would then facilitate. I think it's a somewhat challenging position in terms of the planning permission because it's a civil right of access that will have to be agreed between the two parties and sort of somewhat outside of the planning system. So I can't dictate too much how they arrange between themselves to conduct that access point, although the agent is here, I think, so they might have further detail on that conversation. But just to conclude following that, in terms of the tilted balance then, looking through the points for consideration on the development, the design is acceptable. I think it's been demonstrated that there's a satisfactory impact on residential amenity in terms of, particularly as there's the ability to consider this plot design further in terms of protecting the amenity of this neighbour, and again for the conversion on here to protect the amenities this particular neighbour, that it's acceptable. In that regard, with the lack of land supply, the provision of 6 dwellings is a social benefit, and addressing that lack of supply. There's also a benefit through the efficient use of land policies in the NPPF in terms of reuse of brownfield sites rather than greenfield. And whilst the plot sizes are quite large in terms of the character and position of this site, I think that is appropriate and considered. There is a minor harm in terms of loss of employment land. Obviously, it could generate or could be reused as existing employment, but again, that would have potential amenity implications on existing residents if that were to happen. So, whilst technically it's a minor harm, it probably also does have a beneficial element to it on the side. The proposal also in terms of the county wildlife site, so it's been pulled entirely outside of it, and the development also demonstrates a 10% biodiversity net gain, which I have considered as a benefit in the tilted balance, because this application was submitted before the statutory requirement was imposed in terms of biodiversity net gain, but it's demonstrated it anyway in compliance with policy 3 of the Greater Norwich Local Plan. It's been demonstrated using the statutory metric as well, so the majority of that is through this buffer strip along the bottom of the site here, again, which will be secured as part of the, in terms of maintenance, as part of the legal agreement on the development and the landscaping conditions. In terms of highways, impacts are acceptable and able to be mitigated via the highways conditions that are imposed. There were some discussions around ecological impacts, understandably, because of the county wildlife site. All surveys have now been provided, and Norfolk Wildlife Trust, I've put in the update sheet because that came in since I wrote the committee report. Norfolk Wildlife Trust have confirmed they've seen everything they need to now, as has the council's ecologist. So that gives us the necessary confidence to condition the remaining items on that front as well. So all in all, in terms of the balance, it's considered that the benefits of the scheme do outweigh the harms that are caused, and that leads to the recommendation, which I will read out because it's a delegated authority one. So that's to delegated authority to approve, subject to nutrient neutrality mitigation. We need to process credits as per the usual process, and then the legal agreement in terms of securing the off-site open space contribution, landscape management and GIRAMs. And the element regarding the up-to-date ecology surveys can fall away from that because we now have them and that's all agreed.
Thank you very much indeed for that comprehensive presentation. Have the committee members got any questions for the planning officer? Yes, Councillor Cobb.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. I have concerns about this because actually this is for 4 self-builds, and this clearly shows 5 plots, because there is the building on the left-hand side adjacent the neighbour, and then there is 4 more plots, so that's actually 5, isn't it? And we're asking for 4 self-builds.
Yeah, so this plot up here is the conversion, so it's four self-builds, the conversion and a full. So this one's full permission. Self-build is plots 1, 4, 5, 6, and the conversion is plot 2. So the outline element is 4 self-build plots and a conversion, and the full element is a single dwelling and private drive.
Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think overall it's a good proposal. It previously used brownfield site, uses the land quite well. Just one observation: the commercial element. It's an observation really. The commercial element which appears to be left. I just want a little bit of clarity on the access of that. And in terms of the use of the commercial element, I mean, I appreciate that it's not a particularly large site, but to ensure that the domestic properties, which look pretty good, and the self-build is a good idea, all those things, to be honest, seem pretty good. But in terms of the usage of that commercial, just for example, it could be used for self-storage containers, just for example. Got nothing against that whatsoever. But in the domestic building setting, would that be appropriate use? All I'm simply saying is, what are the previous uses, and is there any conditions in relation to the previous use of the commercial part of the land? You know, the rest of the development seems pretty sound, pretty good. It reuses the land. It brings in a mix of self-build, converts a previous office-style building sort of back to sort of a domestic type use. Overall, pretty good. But just a little bit more information, please, on the commercial side.
Yeah, absolutely. So because it's only got storage uses as that historical permission, and there's no existing buildings on there, that storage really could only be surface outdoor storage at the moment. If you were to bring containers, buildings, anything like that onto the land, sort of large lighting columns, and I think that would all require a further permission, at which point we could then consider and condition the impact on the residential development and the other neighbouring dwellings around it. So I think because of that gave sufficient confidence that the interaction is acceptable as it is, because of the limited amount of use that could actually currently have without that further permission, at which point we could step in and have that consideration.
Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I like the look of this, and I'm pleased to see that there's protections being given for the county wildlife site, and also protection for the TPOs. One little point I would like to raise, it's been noted in one of the objections that the current water pressure is low in the area. Can that be looked at all? Okay.
It can't be looked at in terms of a specific planning requirement. There's the duty to connect on Anglian Water to accommodate new development. So they will, if it can't cope with it, they are required to connect it under that duty, but it's built into legislation. So there's nothing specific we can apply to here, but they have the duty to enable it.
Do we have any other questions for the officer? No? Okay, thank you. We now move to public speaking. We have no one from the parish or town council and no one registered to object. We have a supporter, Mr. Scott Brown. Thank you very much for coming. Do take a seat at the public speaking area. You have 5 minutes from when you start, and we'll give you notice when you've just got a minute left.
Thank you.
And yes, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Scott Brown, agent on behalf of this application and speaking for it today. Chair, members of the committee, as the officer's report states, this application has been subject to adaptation and change during the consultation process. This includes a reduction in site area and the number of proposed dwellings. It has evolved to reflect the reviews and observations made by the numerous consultees that this site setting deserves. The existing and historic industrial use of the site from lime works and gas site has been accessed down Harbord Road in the past. We are now seeking permission for 6 new residential dwellings, all of which will be accessed from the site's existing Harbord Road access. The proposed site layout will complete the road and remove any existing industrial use access from Harbord Road. The site sits between 2 woodland areas. As part of this proposal, these woodland areas will be linked behind the plots with an 8 metre deep by 132 metre wide wildlife corridor. This planting and habitat connectivity will replace what is currently a concreted and fenced off unused industrial site and will bring a biodiversity net gain to the site and into the wider adjacent county wildlife site. The final proposal now seeks the loss of only one small tree on the site. The additional planting that will occur within the wildlife corridor and around the new plots and access will replace this lost tree 100-fold. The 2008 and 2009 major residential applications that have been refused on this site are long gone, but not forgotten by the Harbord Road residents. With a new site owner and a different desire for the site, the level of objections the past applications received is not reflected upon this submission. This application is not about profit, but about the surroundings in which local people wish to live and what will be self-built dwellings respecting the setting in which it lies, with some of the applicant's own family intending to build plot 3 and the applicant plot 6. The topography of this site is such that the new dwellings to the south will not be visible from Harbord Road. They will not impose on existing dwellings along Harbord Road, and the natural contours and flow of the proposed will blend into the wider setting of the site. The past industrial use provides ample existing services into the site. A mains foul drain running across the site allows connection of all new foul drainage within the confines of the site, and nutrient neutrality can be achieved via credits. The existing office building, which is located adjacent to the Harbord Road access, will be reused and its bungalow form retained. It will be refurbished to meet current standards and will provide one of the proposed 6 units. Part of the loft space within the old office building will form a back loft in accordance with the Natural England licence that will be required and will be provided in perpetuity. It should be noted that despite the previous planning history of this site, the number of objections received, even to the initial submission of the scheme, was minimal, and the final amendment of the scheme has left us with no issues that cannot be controlled via suitable planning conditions. The application has support from the parish, who have been engaged with at all stages of the application process, support from County Member Councillor Mark Roper, and the support from your planning department. There will be economic benefits with the local spending, benefits from the provision of 6 new dwellings, ecological and visual benefits to the character of the existing site and surroundings, and we urge the committee members to vote in agreement with your officer's recommendation today and approve this application. Just to clarify, the small retained industrial land that the officer referred to is owned by the adjacent property 11 Harbord Road and does not form part of this site. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to the committee. Do we have any questions for the speaker from the committee members? No? Thank you very much. So we now go back into committee session for comments, discussion and voting on this application. So do we have any? Yep, Councillor. So we have a proposal to approve this application. Councillor Coles.
I would quite like a little bit of discussion on this. This does not accord with policy 7.5 of the GNLP, which restricts self-builds adjacent dwelling houses to up to 3 self-builds. So this is more than that. And obviously the new build property, which is plot 3, I think that's outside the development site, but it is obviously very, very good use of ex-commercial land. Another thing that I'm concerned about is the area of commercial land as well, and we don't really know exactly what will happen to that, being so close to, or really, if this goes ahead, it will just be in the middle of several dwelling houses, and that could cause a real problem for local residents once these houses are built out. So I don't know what everyone else thinks of that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Orber.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I think the 99% of the proposal is great. I think it's a great use of brownfield site. It's nice to see some self-builds go up. It's a little complicated with the conversion and the number of plots of self-build that are going up. I think I'm the same. I'm slightly worried as to what will happen to the commercial land, and that access road into the commercial site is still retained, I notice. So I'm a little confused as to why that's still there, because I would hope that would be removed, but I'm assuming that that's still there for access to that commercial site. If that's, can clarify that, please.
Yeah, so this access bit up here is outside of the ownership of the applicant, so can't be included inside the red line. And then there's that civil right of access agreement, which results in the gate that's in there. So it can't be closed off by this application necessarily, but what we can do and have proposed by the conditions is prevent any of this proposed development from utilising it.
I would be concerned about it. So I'm not entirely sure about the uses for that commercial land. So we have storage, but for example, would there be, could you have dangerous chemicals stored on that land, for example, in containers outside? What is there to restrict that sort of use of storage? I'm not quite entirely sure either.
Being a historical permission, they're not really quite as detailed as they probably would be these days. So there are the storage permissions related to specific items. I think they might be listed in there. So much of it actually, in terms of the permission on that particular site, you'll see some of the older permissions in the planning history in terms of lime storage and things like that. So that narrows it down quite significantly. I think because of its historic association with the rest of the site use that obviously is no longer there. There's very limited ability to actually develop that, as I've said, into something that works on its own without a further permission going in there. So whilst technically you could store items that related back to that historic storage use, the likelihood of that actually coming forward, or the ability of that to come forward when the rest of the site's not in use, is very, very limited without a further planning application.
Could I just say something? Well, Joe, if that's okay. I think what we just heard from the agent as well, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brown, is that that piece of land is owned by the adjacent residential property, so you wouldn't have thought that they would do anything that would denigrate their residential amenity.
Councillor Clancy.
Just an observation, and I think anything drastic within that commercial land, the officer will be able to put me right, but I believe would require a further additional planning application. For example, if it was self-storage containers, in other words, like these are cropping up, these self-storage container units, I believe that would require an additional planning application. Secondly, again, as I say, I do like the application, and I think in view of the fact that the commercial land doesn't form part of this application, I think with the appropriate safeguards, the assurances from the officer that that would require additional planning applications for any significant or material change of that use, I think the rest of the application, why I'm happy to propose it, it is a good use of the land. And I think the committee can't really judge on that land because it doesn't form part of this application. But I think the assurances which the officer has given in terms of, for argument's sake, the reuse of this commercial land, in terms of where it's now located or will be located effectively in a residential setting, would mean that it would generate a further and additional application. So I would be reasonably assured by that, Chairman.
Councillor Coppleston.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like some clarification. So the commercial land cannot be accessed via Harbord Road, and also the only access to the commercial land is off to the left-hand side of the site. I am concerned about the siting of the large triple garage block for plot 3, because actually the new roadway, which would suggest they'd have to come from the left of the plan and round nearly a right-hand bend round the garage block to access the commercial land. So if there was a large vehicle coming onto site, that's going to make the turning quite difficult, and that would concern me. As Councillor Clancy has already said, and the Assistant Director for Planning has said, that is in the ownership of the neighbouring property, but that may not always be the case. So I think we need to sort of protect any future residents from any problems going forward. Thank you, Chair.
I think the size of that parcel really needs to be seen in its context as well, because as you can see from the plan, it's actually smaller than most of the residential plots, so the likelihood of anything substantial being able to even get on there, because if you pulled an HGV into that site, there's not enough space for it to turn once it's in there either. So I think that really limits down what it can be used for now logistically as much as it does in terms of the planning use.
Do we have any other questions for the officer? Sorry, any discussion points? No. I'm happy to second the proposal. So we have a proposal to approve the application from Councillor Clancy. I'm happy to second that proposal because I think that although it's come to committee because it is contrary to policy, so it only partially fits the current policies. As Councillor Coppelson has pointed out, it doesn't quite fit policy 7.5 of the GNLP, and there are some other issues. It is slightly outside the development limit for Frettenham, but I think overall it is good use of a brownfield site that's currently vacant and overgrown, and we've seen a number of applications come forward historically for this with much bigger numbers of houses. So this does seem probably a good plan, and it has been worked through, I think, well with the planning team. And there aren't any major objections. There's conditions from highways, but there's no flood risk. The parish council's in support, the county council is supportive, and I think also it's good. It's not liable for biodiversity net gain, but the developer is aiming to achieve it on the site. The plans have been amended, so now no TPO trees are going to be impacted, and there'll be a section 106 to cover the landscaping and maintenance, and most importantly, I think the county wildlife site won't be impacted by the revision of the plans. So I'm happy to second it. So if we go to the vote, please raise your hands if you are happy to approve this application. Thank you. So that application has now been approved. And so we move to the next agenda item, which is item 4D, and the application is 2025/1922, and it is on land north of Carrowbrick House in Carrowbrick Close in Helsden. And we have Planning Officer Martin Clark presenting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So land north of Carrowbrick House. It is a prior approval application, so it's not full planning application. It is prior approval. So permitted development sets out that the proposal complies with Class A of Part 16, which allows for telecommunications development. Class A requires that applicants submit a prior approval application, and that allows us to only consider siting and appearance. So it specifies that the siting and appearance of any development are such that the visual impact of the development on the surrounding area is minimised as far as practicable. So you can see the site here. This is Carrowbrick Close. you've got development here, the residential properties, Carabreck House, the council training centre. This just shows you on an aerial image, so you can see you've got those residential properties here, the training centre here, and then you have open fields heading sort of west and south. That's down towards the River Wensum River Valley. So it is within the River Wensum River Valley character area, so we have to give consideration to the impact on the character of that area as well. And within the that landscape area document, the planning guidelines specifically state that we should seek to ensure the sensitive location of development involving tall structures such as telecommunication masts in relation to prominent skyline locations both within the area and within adjacent character areas. So I'll show you some images shortly that sort of show the impact it might have. So here's just the site plan. So you've got the mast that would be located centrally there. You have associated cabinets and equipment. And then you can see here there is fencing around that to create an enclosure around those cabinets and the mast. It is 25 metres in height, so it is of significant height. You have got obviously various antenna and equipment located at the top of it. So whilst it is obviously a lattice mast, so it's not a solid structure, it is of significant height, and at the top you're going to have, I mean, this plan shows approximately 2.5 metres in width with the antennas and equipment located at the top. That's obviously the most visible part of the structure. You have got some trees surrounding the site, so you can see here some of the levels of those trees. You've got towards the left here, so 13 metres up to 17 metres on the other side. So just some images of the site. So where this van and shipping container is roughly where the site would be located. So you can see just how close, and in the following image, just how close it would be to, this is Carabreck House, the council training centre and outbuildings. So obviously a 25 metre mast here, it is going to be very, very close, about 22 metres away from the edge of this building. This is just moving slightly further back away from the site. This is the access to Carabreck close to the right here, where you would access the residential properties. Obviously the mast would be just in here. So I mean, these images just show that there is obviously significant tree coverage along Carabreck Close. There are gaps, as you will see in some of these images, through those trees, and as neighbour representations have pointed out, a lot of the trees are deciduous. So obviously when I went out to site and took these photos, there was a good level of coverage. In the autumn and winter months, that will obviously lessen, and there is an image here that was submitted by a neighbour to show the trees in autumn or winter. Obviously this is looking sort of from where the site would be back towards the dwellings, but it shows you obviously the difference in terms of the screening that there would be during the autumn and winter months from that tree coverage. So this is a view from Drayton High Road looking back. So you do have a fair amount of tree coverage provided screening, so you would have the mast just beyond that tree there. This is looking, so just here on the map you can see this is Margaret Close, which is just off of Drayton High Road, looking back towards the site over here. So the applicants have stated that these trees are sort of 17 metres towards the front here and 13 metres here. So you can obviously imagine a 25 metre mast popping up over the top here. There is obviously screening in parts along this road. So you know there are trees and hedgerows which will in some parts provide screening, but there are open parts. There is going to be a high level of visibility over the top of those trees from that direction as well. So these are some drone images that the agents and applicants have provided, which show obviously some of that tree coverage. Obviously it is a bit thicker here towards the properties, but obviously as they are deciduous, a lot of them, when that leaf coverage falls, it's going to make the mast a lot more visible to those nearby residential properties. As you come round the site, obviously the trees are getting smaller, so they're a lot less dense as well. I think from the next images as well. So I believe these were taken from about 22.5 metres height, so sort of the bottom of the equipment at the top of the tower. So obviously that will be slightly higher than where these images were taken from. But this does show, obviously to the side, it is a lot more open. You have got that tree coverage facing Drayton High Road. But to the side here, and then coming round to the rear of the site, which obviously then you're facing down into the river valley, the land slopes down away from the site. You've got far less tree coverage to provide that screening. So it's having a much more significant impact as well on that setting of that river valley, which obviously the policy are looking to protect. So just finish here with the obviously images of the elevations and the site plan. We have to obviously consider that there is a benefit to the proposal of replacing coverage from the existing mast, which they've been given a notice to quit. So that mast will cease to be in use. They need to replace the coverage lost from that. This will replace that and enhance the coverage for the area. But we have to weigh that against any impacts. We consider that the impact on the character appearance of the area, the river valley, is significant. To have a 25-metre lattice tower, approximately 2.5 metres wide at the top with equipment, is going to have a significant impact on that landscape. For those nearby residential properties, Carabreck House, the training centre, and as I say in particular, the river valley character area, it's going to be highly visible. It's having a significant impact. It's going to be approximately 65 to 80 metres to those closest properties along Carabreck Close. So again, to have a structure of that height is going to be overbearing on those nearby neighbours. The other thing that we have put in the refusal reasons is that it is obviously very close to significant trees. We haven't had any information in terms of what impact it would have on those trees. So we haven't been able to assess whether it's going to cause any harm to those trees. So we consider that those significant adverse impacts outweigh the benefit of replacing that lost coverage. So we're recommending that it be refused.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive presentation. Do we have any questions for the planning officer? Yes, we do. So, Councillor Berry first.
Thank you, Martin. Very interesting. Do you know the location and the height of the existing mast, please? Also, I've great concerns about masts like this being very close to residential properties. I think there's still a grey area and a lot of uncertainty as to the effect that it has on people's health. Thank you.
Yeah, so the existing mast is at the Drayton Golf Course. So they've been given notice to quit because of the development there. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. It is a smaller mast, so it's not 25 metres. Off the top of my head, I think it may be 13 or 15 metres, something like that. So it is smaller. This one, the agent has said it needs to be taller because of the tree coverage, which obviously provides screening. But because the trees are of a certain height, the mast then needs to be a certain height to then operate. I've forgotten the second part of you. Oh, the health implications. We can't consider the health implications. So planning guidance specifically states that we can't consider that. We're obviously not experts in terms of the health implications of telecommunications. So we can't consider that, and we're specific. That's specified in planning guidance.
We have Councillor Alber, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we're considering this today because, remind me, the essential question was something about the lines of, have the developers, I'll call them developers in this case, have done it as much as they possibly can to minimise the impact of that. And that's the test, I think, isn't it? You know, so when you consider putting a mast somewhere, it kind of has to be up somewhere high. It has to be on a hill or somewhere to get good coverage. That's the first thing to say. The second thing I think is that we're losing a mast in Helston, so that's going to have implications. So I want to know whether that's been considered. I would argue that they've done a reasonable amount to hide a mast of this height. Your diagrams here, as lovely as they are, don't put the mast in scale on those pictures. You've done a guess. Has anyone done any modelling as to, or any pictures of exactly how high the mast would look, let's say from Drayton High Road or from Low Road? So, you know, those I think we need a bit more facts before we can make a decision, because a lot of that, what you're saying, is speculation.
Yeah. So we're just going to jump in, and then Martin will correct me if as and when I get technical details wrong. These aren't our plans. These are the developers' plans. We've not done anything with these. These are what they consider to be the mast in relation to those trees on the site. So I've got no reason to doubt that they're accurate. In terms of what we're considering whether it complies with Class A1 of Part 16. It passes that test, that's fine, and then we're only considering the siting and design of the application. That's not us considering the loss of the other mast, that's us considering the siting and design. Yes, there will be an impact in terms of that mast being lost. It's for, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Vodafone and 3, who are the mast operators. Yes, it will, but in terms of that trade-off, although again we're not really trading off, because again I'm going to repeat again, we're looking at the siting and design, the impact of this is so significant in our view, particularly across those wider landscapes, that we just consider it to be unacceptable in an appropriate location. And just the final point is that as part of their search they did look at other applications, other locations in the area. It's within the documentation. They're in and around about a mile-ish radius of this site, and obviously their previous site. So they have done their homework in trying to find the best site. We don't think it's the best site for the reasons that Martin has set out.
Can I just come back? Oh. So I understand that you think it's too visible, but I don't think you've got enough information to say whether it's too visible. There aren't the diagrams, aren't the drawings. I mean, if you want to say it's visible from Drayton High Road, then it doesn't take very long for the trees to hide quite a high, tall object from the Drayton High Road. I appreciate local residents won't like it, and that's fair enough, because you're right, you're very close to it. But from the wider community, I would argue you could lose that sort of height, because the trees are quite close to you. From Low Road, you won't be able to see this from Low Road because there's hedges all the way down Low Road. So in terms of people passing by and seeing it, I challenge whether or not you would be able to see it. And I don't think there's the information here to dispute that, because we've only got, you know, someone's guess.
So, I mean, the applicant did provide some photo montage images. I mean, they were largely selected from viewpoints with large trees directly in front of them. Obviously, they're trying to show it from their side that it is acceptable. I didn't feel there was much benefit to including them in this presentation. They were available to view on the documents online. They had largely showed them in flattering positions and said, there's a big tree in front of me, I won't be able to see it because it's here. I didn't think there was much use to those images. I mean, we don't have the software available to sort of do photo montages ourselves. I think, you know, our view is that it would be highly visible within views. There are going to be areas where you've got tree coverage and it's going to restrict views or block views. We acknowledge that. Obviously, we have taken into consideration the benefits that it does provide. Our view is that those impacts, significant adverse impacts, outweigh that benefit.
Thank you. I think we had Councillor Copleston and then Councillor Clancy, and then, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, thank you for your presentation, and I realise this is only prior approval, so I guess planning officers don't do so much work on that as a full application. You can clearly see Carrabrack House from the low road, from the river valley. I've often looked up and I use the low road an awful lot, and I am very concerned that this mast of 25 metres will be on exceedingly high ground. Carrabrack House sits way above the low road. I don't know how many metres up it is, but and you will be able to see this mast from miles around. Yeah. Do you have any photographs at all from the low road, Martin, or would that be done in a full application, please?
Unfortunately, I don't have any from low road. I have seen myself that obviously you can see, as you say, Carrabrack House. I mean, the building is, I think, approximately 10 metres tall. Yes. So obviously you can imagine if it's 15 metres above that, it is going to be highly visible. I mean, I will just sort of come back to a point that you made in terms of not having enough information. We have to make a decision. If we don't, they get deemed consent. So if we don't make a decision, the applicant would have deemed consent and can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for clarity, obviously we all want to use our mobile phones, but quite logically, nobody wants a mast beside them. And I think this is always a predicament with masts. And I think, as Councillor Berry has alluded to, you know, that the health issues are possibly unproven, and I do accept they can't be a material planning consideration, so we'll park that. But just a couple of observations. I apologise if this is covered and I've missed it, but how much has the operator explored mast sharing? Because I believe they do have a duty to share if possible. Has that been adequately explored? I'm not 100% certain whether it has. Secondly, again, it is mentioned, but is that potentially a more suitable site which would basically achieve the necessary coverage but not be have the implications on the valley and neighbouring properties? Now, again, I know this is the $1 million question, and I do appreciate there is no, inverted commas, ideal site. But I think the mast sharing, I think, is pertinent, and I'm not sure. And again, I think that AD planning has just alluded to, again, is there not ultimately an automatic right through, I can't remember, is it the Telecoms Act or something, which allows these masts ultimately to be erected? So I think wherever we go with this, as I say, I don't think it's a great location. I also recognise that we all want our mobile phones and we all want the best possible reception. We all get most annoyed when you go through an area and you don't have a reception. So I can see it from all sides, but two key issues, mast sharing, and again, I would suggest they possibly have, but have they adequately explored more suitable locations? I just welcome further comment.
Yeah, I mean, they've looked at other sites. I believe one or two of those were existing telecommunication sites. They've all been discounted for various reasons, whether they weren't tall enough structures, whether there wasn't enough space, you know, technical reasons why that site wouldn't have operated. They have looked at other sites and discounted them. I think obviously we have to make a decision as to whether this one is acceptable. We just feel that the harm is far too significant to allow it.
just a quick supplementary on that. I think in view of, again, I think you covered it more than adequately, but I think the commercial implications of mast sharing, operators are not keen, because obviously that brings a higher level of competition within the area. However, they have an obligation to mast share. And I would just suggest that maybe this was explored a little more to see whether there is an opportunity to do this. I'm certainly not saying you haven't explored it, but I do know from experience years gone by of negotiating these contracts that basically, as much as there is an obligation to share, they don't like doing it, because in reality they'll put up all sorts of obstacles. The freehold owner of a mast will put up all sorts of obstacles to stop another operator, in simple terms, bolting on kit to that mast. So I think that may well be worth a little pushback on that to see whether that has been adequately explored, because again, it's not an ideal location, but ultimately the legal obligation of provision of the mast may well kick in.
Can I just very quickly, and just to say I don't disagree with that point at all. I just want to make sure that we're considering the one that's in front of us. So we're just considering whether it meets requirements, as said before, and the siting and the design of this particular application. But it's been said in a public arena. I'm sure the applicants will hopefully take that away and consider it.
Councillor Leggett, did you want to speak?
Happy to put this on. Thank you, Chair. I know the site and I support the points made by Councillor Cobblestone, but in your reasons for refusal, I think the last point you're saying insufficient information has been received by the local planning authority to assess merits of the scheme relating impact on trees. Now, I may have missed if you covered that, but I want to just ask you if you have now had that information.
No, so we haven't had any information in relation to the trees. Obviously, there are significant trees in close proximity. There's a good chance that the root protection areas would be where this is going to be located. We haven't had any information to show whether there is an impact, and if there is, how that would be mitigated.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the officer? No? Thank you. So we now move to public speaking. We have Councillor David Maidstone from the Parish Council, do we? Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes to speak from when you start, and we'll let you know when you've just got 1 minute left. Thank you.
I'm David Maidstone. I'm the Chair of Helston Parish Council. We did originally object to this, and all I'm going to do is to reiterate our objections, having been authorised by the Council last night to come and speak today. It's ironic that the agenda was set up in the way it was, with the Persimmon Homes statements first of all, because the existing mast is on the corner of the golf course, as Martin said. It's a short mast, it's right on the edge of the road, it's got terrific coverage, nobody's ever objected. The new houses being built are obviously going to be sold on the basis that they can see the mast. Yet Persimmon said, we don't want it there because we won't be able to sell the houses. Round the corner in the Wensum Valley, you've got this development of houses within Carrowbreck Close. They're 65 metres from the mast. They are state-of-the-art ecology houses. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but passive house, so they are energy efficient. Everything that this council stands for. They're worth over £500,000 each. There was no mast when the residents, many of them here, bought the houses. Persimmon's average house price at the moment is £284,000, and people will be buying them. They will buy them whether there's a mast there or not. Due to the siting and the appearance of the proposal, I heard what you said about being seen, etc. The irony of a phone mast is the more it's obscured, the less effective it is. It's down in a low valley, so it's a tall mast to get the coverage of the existing mast. Since Martin's report came in, Helston Parish Council has had a request for a visit from Cornerstone to site a mast at the community centre. They've already accepted Martin's report. They're moving to an alternative. The alternatives that they'd already discounted, and they're asking to come and see it there. I'm indebted to our former parish clerk, who gives me the exact piece of legislation on this. The visual impact of development on the surrounding area is minimised, and the application is therefore considered to be in conflict with Class A.2, 1, B and C of Part 16 of Schedule 2 of the Town and Country Planning, General Permitted Development England Order 2015, as amended, as well as Policy 2 of the Greater Norwich Local Plan and Policies GC4 and EN2 of the Broadland Development Management. I couldn't have remembered that, so that's why I've written down. Basically, you've got reasons to refuse this. Your planning officer has suggested you refuse it. Unfortunately, a councillor called it in for you to go back over, and the only possible reason would be that they want it there. They don't. They just called it in too quick before Martin's report was done. We are a society dependent on our technology, but technology is rapidly increasing. 6G, which will be in operation by 2033, when 3 and 2G is removed completely, requires shorter masts. Why do you want to build a 25-metre mast in an area of real natural beauty? And if you can't see it, it's not doing the job. So you can see it, you will see it, and it shouldn't be built. Helston Parish Council remains strongly opposed to this application. We hope that you will throw it out. Unfortunately, as you say, the legislation and the current government is pushing through legislation to improve broadband coverage. It's very difficult to refuse access to them. So basically, yes, we may end up with one at the community centre. So I apologise to Helston residents that you may feel your children, the health risk's not proven, but you may not want your children going to baby groups where the centre is. But we will put it there rather than see our residents affected. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak. Just before you get up, are there any questions for our speaker from the committee? No. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and speaking. And we also have two people registered. Yep, thank you. So Mr. Gibson and Mr. Stocks, you each have 5 minutes to speak. You might want to both come up and perhaps take it in turns. So you each have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll let you know when you've just got 1 minute left. Thank you.
Good morning.
Oh, if you'd like to just press the speaker button on the microphone.
Hang on. Morning, Chair, members of the committee. Martin Gibson. I'm objecting to this application for a number of reasons. These have been previously submitted. Yes, we all need different levels of new infrastructure to meet our growing needs for commercial and domestic use. But I do feel that this application, there has been a lack of duty of care to the residents of Carrabrek and the surrounding area. It is stated that the existing mast being decommissioned and the site is not being reconsidered as there are houses to be built in this area. So I ask, why has Carrabrek been chosen for this new proposed mast? It is an award-winning private development, and there seems to be no consideration to the residents of this development.
The site selection process goes into great detail about various other sites, but there is no consideration in the document regarding Carrabrek. It is assumed that this is the site to be used. It is very disappointing that this site selection process, the one site that seems to be viable to keep all commercial assets in one place, has not been investigated, I believe, at great length. I'm referring to the ambulance station in Hospital Lane. Whilst the existing mast there is stated to be only carrying lightweight equipment, I cannot understand why further negotiations with the owners of the ambulance site could not take place to either replace the existing mast or to install a new mast and cabinets on the site. Having visited the site, there appears to me to be sufficient space available to accommodate the mast and cabinet design which is being proposed at Carrabrek. Furthermore, and I repeat that all commercial assets should be kept in one place. Carrabrek Road, which is being suggested as the access to the proposed new site, is only 3.2 metres wide, and I do not believe the road junction at the Drayton High Road has sufficient vision display 120 metres in either direction at a setback of 2.4 metres for commercial use. The proposed application for a commercial business for this new mast will undoubtedly be expanded upon in years to come, which will cause more issues and movements of vehicles in Carrabrek Road for the residents. I refer to the details in the application and the report where Cornerstone considers the trees will shield the mast. Do they understand that most of these trees are deciduous and that in the months to come, the whole aspect of shielding will completely change, as they are merely confirming the mast will tower above the trees for all to see in many directions. I also note that on Vodafone's own website, and I quote, "Not all sites are suitable as they cannot be too many neighbouring buildings or trees in the way as these lead to the block in the mast signals," unquote. So can I ask, are Cornerstone using the shielding of the trees as a good excuse to substantiate this application, particularly if you view or photograph the site at this time of year? There is also the question about health living close to a mobile phone mast. Documents suggest that there isn't universally agreed safe distances. However, there has been cases where people living within 300 metres have had health issues such as headaches and sleep disturbance. One of the biggest issues relating to potential health relating to this application
one minute left.
is stress and anxiety that the owners of the properties at Carrabrek will be worried about. And I quote from the National Association of Estate Agents, 29th of July 2025, that properties close to a mobile phone mast could see a drop in value of up to 10%. This is really unacceptable given that people have worked hard to invest to live in this unique small development. Furthermore, if this application is accepted, it has the potential to wipe away in excess of £500,000 off the value of these properties. And if the owners want to sell, it would be extremely difficult to sell as a number of lenders will not lend on properties close to mobile phone masts. Surely this must be taken into consideration. Given the amount of objections and the reasons why, I hope the Planning Committee of Broadland will take this into consideration and support the residents of Carrabrek, which are part of the Broadland community, and turn this application down. I have nothing further to say.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Stocks, would you like to speak? You have 5 minutes as well, and I'll let you know when you've got 1 minute left.
Good morning, everyone. I live at number 8 Carrabrek Close with my family and dogs. I am absolutely against the mast and speak for the residents of Carrabrek Meadow. The council were involved in the multi-award winning Carrabrek Meadow and have now created a double standard from the ecological and aesthetic point of view by thinking of this commercial development. The proposed mast is out of character, overbearing, ruins the woodland setting and will not appear as normal. It's an absolute eyesore, particularly from our balconies, for Carrabrek Meadow and Drayton High Road. The information that's available online stated that only 2 properties were affected. There are at least 19 properties, 50 people, elderly and children within 100 metres of the proposed mast. Most of us cannot understand why the ambulance site wasn't considered as for a new mast. I purchased my home, developed by Broadland Growth, promoted as surrounded by trees, a woodland walk, a calm environment. Incidentally, now my house is valued at £650,000. I quote Councillor Andrew Proctor, leader at the time of Broadland Council and chairman of Broadland Growth. Carrabrek Meadow is an exciting development which raises the bar for local authorities in the delivery of housing. We are making a difference to our communities while offering something different to the marketplace and meeting the demand for housing in Broadland, which also creates a significant social value for our district. The wildlife environment Carrabrek values is affected, especially the bats, which studies show are reduced in number by large masts due to insect decline. Carrabrek Meadow was actually designed to increase bat numbers. It has low-level bollard lighting, while the mast will actually reduce the bat population. Carrabrek Road is very, very narrow, as Martin mentioned, designed for walking and cycling, and it has no raised curbs. It won't take kindly to a 10, 20 or 30-ton truck driving along to construct the mast. And this would just be the development stages. We can assume that there'll be trucks going down there to service it and also to increase the number of masts. We realise that there will be additions to the mast. The current proposal is for 11 antennas and dishes, which could be 20 before long, or it can go even further, I assume. Why aren't there other simple masts being established, such as the one at the Bull Roundabout, which is, not that bad to look at? I have an architectural background and note that the elevations and the recent photographs don't show the real situation. There is no northeast elevation, particularly from Carrabrek Close. This is the primary view for the residents of Carrabrek. And as Martin says, and everybody noticed, there's no account really taking into account that the trees are deciduous. Why are Cornerstone bringing this application for a mast on such a large scale when there is no other similar to be seen anywhere within the residential areas?
You have 1 minute left, 1 minute.
Is it because Persimmon gave notice to quit on the existing considerably small mast on Hospital Lane because they might build homes at some future date which might be too close to their unbuilt, unsold homes? Carrabrek Meadow residents who are already in situ should be afforded the same degree of consideration as to the closeness of the mast to their properties. To quote my partner, "This is one of the best developments in Norwich. Why is it being stuffed up?" She's uneducated in many ways. There are many better suited sites, or heaven forbid the developers just wait and see what houses are built and where before moving masts around. Currently, Carrabrek and surrounding areas have excellent signal, and the mast will blight Waveney Valley and rural areas. Please reject this application as advised by the case officer in charge. Thank you for listening. Amen. Oh, got a photo from Carrabrek Close if anybody's interested in looking. Thank you. Anybody got a joke?
Thank you very much for coming to speak. Do we have any questions for our speakers from the committee? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We now go into committee session again for comments, discussion and voting on this application. So, Councillor Tipple.
Sure, clarify, ask Mark the question based on what the speaker said. Is it correct that they've looking at selecting a different site, the company for this one?
We don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Okay.
Councillor Copleston.
I just want to thank the speakers firstly, and they spoke very eloquently, and as they said, Carrabreck Meadow is an exemplar housing site right next to our training centre. The land around Carrabreck is very, very high and can be seen very easily from the Wensum Valley and the low road. I feel we've got some duty of care to our residents to protect them from this sort of development. It's poorly sited, and I would really like to move at this point that we refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we do have a proposer for refusing this application, but we'll continue with discussion. Thank you. Councillor Clancy.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to concur with what Councillor Cobblestone said. I mean, I appreciate we do have to judge this application on the application and not other matters. But I would like to make the observations, and I think it's right too, that the committee are aware of this, because I think I would strongly suggest that mast shearing and other locations have not been properly explored. I think the speakers alluded to the ambulance site, which has got a lot of tech, got a lot of masts there, and it would be eminently sensible to explore that further. And I concur with the speakers and other members of the committee that this has been worked on, that Carrabreck is an exemplar site with all the environmental credentials, all the ecological credentials, which took a lot of work to achieve. And again, has been rightly stated, residents bought the properties on that basis. It's effectively, this site is being effectively moved. Frankly and honestly, I can't guess why, but I would suggest for commercial reasons, the proposal is to move the mast from its existing location to another location, which doesn't impact on unsold properties, but this mast will impact on existing properties. So I fully support the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Alba.
Thank you, Chair. We're here to judge the application that's in front of us, and not possible reasons for other sites. It is a tough one. Nobody really wants to have and see these masts anywhere in the country, let alone in an award-winning development. But they do have to be sited somewhere. They're necessarily going to be high, because that's how we get the best signal, and we all want a mobile phone signal. Whether we like it or not, we all use our mobiles, and they have to be put somewhere. So my concern, I suppose, is if it gets rejected here, where else is it going to go? I mean, we'll be here, in 6 months' time, rejecting another site. So it is a tough one. It's not. We're not here. We're not judging whether the mast is invisible. We're judging whether or not they've made every effort to minimise the view of the mast. And it's a difficult one, given the mast needs to be seen to have the signal. So I think I'd like all committee members to think about those issues, and it's a difficult one, but they've got to be cited somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or observations from the committee? Councillor Berry.
Thanks, Chair. In response to Councillor Alba's observations, I would just say that the recent speakers had mentioned that Cornerstone had already approached the community centre, so they may have got a plan B. Thank you. But I do understand what you say, Paul.
Any other comments at all? No. So we have a proposal from Councillor Copleston that we go with the planning officer's recommendation that we refuse this application. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Clancy, thank you. Yes, I mean, my personal view is I would agree with the planning officer's recommendation that we object on grounds of harm to the landscape and impact on amenity of neighbours, because this mast is overbearing in size and scale. The planning policy reasons, if we do go for a refusal, are outlined in the report. I won't read them all out, but they are there on page 86 of the agenda. So all those who are in favour of refusing this application, please raise your hands. Thank you. And do we have an opposition or, yeah, okay, one. Thank you very much. That application has been refused.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who attended, all members of the public, thank you. And we'll now move to item 5 on the agenda, which is to look at planning appeals information.
Yes, certainly, thank you, Chair. And as Chair said, these are for information only, so I won't go into the detail of them, but if after the meeting any members want to ask me about them, then please feel free to do so. I'm on page 93. We have a number of appeals there, none of which actually came to committee, all of which were dismissed though, all of which were dismissed apart from one tree application that was approved in part and refused in part as well. But if anyone wants to ask me afterwards, then please do.
Thank you very much to everyone for attending this meeting. I will now